Okay, this is DDC2. We're going to run through the inside controls, so the outer lock, and then we're going to move into the inner lock. If you look over here, this device right here is a caisson gauge. That gives the divers their relative depth calibrated in feet of seawater. The most accurate gauge, of course, is the one on the outside, but this just gives the diver an idea of where they're at, pressurized. It is open at the bottom. We call that a caisson gauge. Moving along here, we come to the communications box. This is a speaker as well as a microphone pickup, so we can talk the top side and they can talk back to us. So it's open comms. Top side, how do you hear me?
Top side hearing.
Okay, loud and clear.
Loud and clear.
Roger, okay. Moving on along here, our inside controls. This chamber is unique to chambers that we use in the offshore environment in that it has inside controls. We normally do not use these, but the chamber is plumbed for the operators on the inside. The divers on the inside could use these valves. This is the exhaust and this is the supply. There are corresponding valves on the outside that are taped in the open position. We normally keep these valves taped in the closed position to remind the occupants that they're to stay closed. So if I would open this valve, I get gas coming out here to pressurize the chamber. This valve here, if I would open that, the chamber were pressurized, would exhaust gas from the chamber to the outside. The corresponding valve, again, must be open. This chamber is also unique in that it has a pickup tube that goes down below the deck plate, which is the proper way to plumb a chamber. We want to pick up our exhaust gas from down below the deck plates. So CO2 sits low in the chamber and it's heavier than air, so we get a good ventilation going from down below the deck plates into the supply line here. Our next set of controls are where the gas comes in from the operator supplied pressurization, and that is through this device here. This is a sintered diffuser, as well as this is. This is a little muffler for the exhaust. These valves are left open, so when the chamber is being pressurized or ventilated from the outside, air is coming from this valve and it is going out through the exhaust here. So you can see on a ventilation, you're just getting a small surface area for ventilation right here. That is not necessarily a desirable thing. A better way would be to take this and put the pickup tube on there and run that down below the deck plates as well. So that's one reason why we hold our vents for about 30 seconds or longer, so that we get good circulation. Other devices, this is a penetrator, of course, for the communications. There's a Cross-Hines EO connector right here. This is a bracket for the sound-powered phone, which has been removed. You've got your viewport. And then we'll move on to the oxygen manifolds here. The chamber is plumbed in the outer lock here with two masks. And we have two masks that are overboard dumps. The oxygen comes in from the outside through an operator-supplied slow opening valve. You would open this valve here. It is open right now, so I'm going to open this valve and give myself oxygen to this mask. 2 or 3 turns is enough for here. Comes into the mask through this supply line right here. This supply line, the smaller line, feeds the mask. There's a pressure regulator here. I want to screw this thing in until I just hear it start to free flow, and then back it out until it stops. That is set for the ambient pressure that I am at. So at depth, you're going to need to adjust this to make it breathe easier. Hold the mask to your face. It's very difficult to exhale through these masks on the surface because of the back pressure of the plumbing. The exhale gas at depth goes through this back pressure regulator, out through this exhaust hose, and then into this manifold. There are quick disconnect fittings right here. This plugs in right here through the collar and the quick disconnect, and then comes into the manifold. This valve must be open. This is the outer lock internal overboard dump valve. It must be open in order for the mask to work. Goes out over the side through another valve, an external overboard dump hull stop, which must be open as well. So 2 valves must be open for the oxygen system to work. So that's your oxygen system here. I'll go ahead and close this off. The last thing I want to point out on the oxygen system are these 2 devices right here. These stainless steel or chrome plated brass devices right here are pressure regulators. They're not relief valves. They look like relief valves, but they're inline pressure regulators. There is a spring in here, and it is set at 50 psi. That way, regardless of what the pressure I'm sending from the outside into the chamber, say I set it at 80 psi, and it's on the surface, this is going to catch that 80 psi and kick it down to 50 through this spring. So you'll always get 50 psi over ambient oxygen pressure regardless of what that bottle pressure is set at. So I could kick that regulator up to 150 psi, not that I'd want to be able to do that, but if I did, this would still act as a check and knock it back down to 50 psi. So one here and one here for each mask. Last control is this valve here, very important valve. It's called the crossover valve. It is a quarter turn open valve. It is normally left in the closed position. When we run surface decompression using oxygen, we will pressurize the inner lock of the chamber. That will be pressurized down to 80 feet. When the divers are on the inside and they need to pressurize, they will pressurize themselves using this valve, not the outside operator. They will open this valve. This interlock acts as a volume tank. There are no occupants in here. There's just gas pressure. Comes through here, starts to pressurize the outer lock. That pressure will slow down until the point that both locks are equalized, at which point you can open the door. Then, very important, you must close this valve before you move into the inner lock. If this valve were left open, we could never bring the outer lock to the surface for transfer of personnel. So those are the controls for the outer lock, and we'll go ahead and move on into the inner lock now.